Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Showalter, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this webinar, this information session for the Master of Arts in Human Rights degree program at the Catholic University of America. I am a journalist with the Christian Post, and I am a current student in the program. This program is under the auspice of the Institute for Human Ecology at Catholic University. And so we're going to discuss a lot of really important things tonight. And it is my pleasure to welcome to this webinar our program director, Professor Bill Saunders. Tonight we're going to be speaking about the purpose of the Master of Arts degree program in Human Rights, why it's relevant, the curriculum content, and the professional advantages that this unique program offers and who would benefit from it, in addition to some of the admission requirements. So please, if you're joining us, and we can wait for a few little bit, just feel free to join in when you're here. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the chat, and we'll get to some of them at the end of this webinar. And so we'll get to explore some of those. And so this presentation will be uploaded to the IHE's YouTube channel very soon within the week, and you will also be receiving it in your email. So if you can revisit this at a later time if you'd like. So Professor Saunders, welcome.
Hey, Brandon.
Well, this is a really great chance for me to say that it was a webinar like this that I watched in the fall of 2020, where I first got very interested in the program. So for those of you watching, you just never know where you'll end up. And I am very much a fan of this graduate degree program. And so we've got some questions here, and the first one that I'll start with you, Professor Saunders, is why a graduate program in human rights?
Well, it's almost, you could ask it the other way around. How can you not have one? Because what the program in let's put it this way, everybody listening to this podcast and everybody walking down the street will say they believe in human rights. And most of the debates we have in society are about human rights. So we need to know what we're talking about. This is to give people a deeper understanding and enrich the conversation, because usually it's just assertions being flung at each other like mud against the wall. So we want something a little deeper than that. And I think if democracy is going to flourish, and if our life together is going to be worth anything, that we're going to serve the common good, we have to understand what are human rights.
Indeed, we do. And so along that line, there are many Master of Arts degree programs in human rights out there today. What distinguishes the MA program at Catholic University from all the rest?
Well, ours is the only one in the country that I know of, and maybe the only one in the world that offers it from the Catholic perspective, which means for those Catholics listening, it means we are indebted to the incredible contribution of Pope St. John Paul II and his insights into human rights, but that's all based in the Catholic tradition of what we call Catholic social thought, and particularly the teaching of Vatican II. So John Paul II was the Pope who took Vatican II and implemented it, and he made his pontificate about that. He also understood that there was this war about what the meaning of human rights is, and that it was important that Catholics be involved in the conversation. And he also realized that the greatest achievement of World War II was the modern human rights movement. And by achievement, I mean not the war itself, but kind of the horror and revulsion at the war led to the achievement of recognizing human rights as essential for peace and security in the world. So we look at it from the perspective of Catholic social thought, John Paul II, the encyclicals of the Pope, but we also look at it from perspectives of law, philosophy, political theory. So it's not like catechetical class for like you had when you were your Catholic school, but it's an in-depth look from the Catholic perspective. And the Catholic perspective is fundamentally about the dignity of each human person. And I understand that nowadays some people are a little tired of hearing that term, or they think it's outdated or outmoded or misused. Well, it is misused, but it isn't outdated now, isn't outmoded, because human dignity is endowed by God on every single solitary person who has ever lived. Every person, however insignificant they are in the world's eyes, was significant enough for Jesus Christ to die for them. So it's not an outmoded concept, despite what some renowned philosophers may say at lectures at some big deal universities. It's the bottom line of everything we do. And that isn't my opinion. That's the teaching of Catholic Church and of Christianity.
Well, speaking of the Catholic Church and Christianity, this MA program has been entrusted to St. Josephine Bakhita. And so I'm going to show everybody here her picture. You can all see this. This is an extraordinary woman right here. So why is this program? Why is she the patron saint of this MA program?
Well, one thing about the human rights program is it's not just an academic exercise in a classroom. It's enriched by a lot of real world experience and practical experience. So if you see over my shoulder, there's a kind of a poster on the wall, and that's of a film that I was involved in making in Sudan around the turn of the century. And Sudan was a place where genocide was taking place. And I established an NGO to work there to stop the genocide and to bring relief to the people. So when I was doing that work, I met Bakhita for the first time. Now, she'd been dead for many years, but all the people there sought her intercession in heaven. And she was just at that point, she was a blessed. So I really call her Blessed Bakhita, because when I met her, she had not been canonized. Although I went to Rome in 2000 when she was canonized, and that was a great day. Also for the United States, Catherine Drexel was canonized on that day, and the Chinese martyrs. But anyway, it's under her patronage because she came from, when I said a minute ago that human dignity is the sure possession of every single person who has ever lived, including the most forgotten, the most remote, the most, quote, insignificant in the world's eyes, the ones that nobody else pays attention to. So she, in the late 1800s, was taken as a slave, and she was sold several times, and she ended up in Italy. And she was kind of the governess to the young girl of the people who were her owners. And she went with that girl to catechetical classes. And she was not mistreated by these Italians, although she was a slave. She had been beaten like a dog when she was in Sudan before she came to the Italians. But they wanted her to return with them when they went back to Sudan. They had been in the diplomatic service, and she refused to go because she had learned about God. And she says in a very moving place, she said that through all those classes, she met the God that she had encountered in the bush in Africa, but she didn't know his name. Mm. So she refused to go back. She was joined a convent, and she was the kind of the doorkeeper, which meant she was the public face, and she interacted with lots of people, and her sanctity became known and recognized, and she was very beloved in Italy. And so that's who Bakhita is. The reason she's our patroness is because within the Catholic Church, she is the patroness against trafficking. She had, slavery. And she's from Sudan, which is one of the most forgotten places. And she is the saint that I suppose I first really encountered in my human rights work.
Very cool. Well, and I think it's worth mentioning that her legacy and contribution to the field of human rights is so significant that at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., there's a great exhibit dedicated to her, and it's viewable even if you go to the first floor of the Museum of the Bible and you look up at the second floor, it's right there in plain view. So it's really her legacy cannot be overstated. So what are the professional advantages that this MA program in human rights at Catholic University, what professional advantages does it offer?
Well, it teaches you to think, teaches you to argue, not argue argumentatively, but argue persuasively for a point of view. If you want to do human rights work, somebody listening might say, what is human rights work? So it gives you advantages to do human rights work, but human rights work is a very broad field. Remember what human rights is about, the dignity of the person, the human person. So anything that is working to promote, protect, defend, advance the dignity of the human person, in my view, is human rights. So it could be what I was doing in Sudan, where we set up an NGO to work in another country where there was a civil war. But it could be working for a pro-life group in the United States. It could be working for a crisis pregnancy center. It could be working for a congressman or woman or senator or somebody in a political administration at the state level who's concerned about these issues, and you are working on those issues yourself. So it could be you could work for a humanitarian organization like the Red Cross, or you could work for a diocese. You could work for your local bishop. They have not from Christian education to anything else. You're going to be well-formed in thinking about human rights from the Catholic perspective. You're going to meet and interact with people who have tremendous experience and networked into all kinds of things from state level to national level. So what it does is it equips you to think deeply and clearly about the meaning of human rights, and equips you to make that argument or to take those insights into your interaction with other people.
That's great. Well, I will just say as a student that in the program now, the advantages of it are exactly as you described. There's also some really great networking opportunities, and the people who are actually doing this work in the field. For those of you watching and are interested in the program, Professor Saunders introduces us to the cream of the crop, people who are actually doing the stuff. And so that's a great component of the program I could just add. And we're here in DC, so it's really at the heart of governmental work, international development, the NGO world, and so it's just great.
Thanks for saying that, Brandon. I think that the point of all this is, first of all, to equip you to think and reason deeply, and then to give you an opportunity to contribute to the struggle for human rights. So part of that is the introduction of students to all these people and all these organizations that are working, broadly, like we said. I mean, as you know, we met with human trafficking, anti-human trafficking organizations. We met with religious freedom protection organizations, or conscience protection organizations, or the medical profession organizations. And we met with people working in what we call Capitol Hill, which is the Congress of the United States. So the point of it is to allow you to feel the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, because, each person has a call or a vocation. I don't know what yours is, and you may not know at the moment. The point is, as you learn about human rights, to hear about organizations and to think about things you haven't, and to see if the Holy Spirit's calling you into that.
That's great. No, and there's definitely good people to help you discern that calling here at CUA. So the next question is, who comprises your advisory board?
Well, I got the best advisory board in the world. I have, I actually think that's true. Marianne Glendon, who is, the great emeritus professor at Harvard Law School, who served both as a U.S. ambassador to the Holy See and the Holy See's ambassador to international conferences. She's written lots of important books, including the best book on the genesis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which came out of the Second World War, as I said, and who was the chairman of the U.S. Commission on Unalienable Rights, which, so if you don't know what it is, that was a commission set up by the Secretary of State to advise the Secretary of State about how to take human rights into account in U.S. foreign policy. And if you think about human rights, that is real, where the rubber, as we say in America, where the rubber meets the road. I mean, it's not classroom theorizing. It's, I'm the Secretary of State. You say I should respect human rights. What are you talking about, and how should I do it? So the Secretary of State, Michael Pompeo, set this commission up to advise him, and she was the chair. And it issued a very good report, which Brandon is going to be talking about in our class on Friday, and which I took some of the previous classes from other years to some of their meetings. And I think it's a great document because it reflects on human rights from the perspective of America's rights tradition, like our Constitution, and also from international human rights tradition, because most people listening will be Americans, but not everybody. And, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a kind of a summoning document for the whole world. And so I think the commission was a brilliant thing to do, and she was the brilliant leader. So she's one person. Another one is Robert George, who is used to be said to be, and I would say still the leading intellectual in America. Apparently some young people don't know who he is, but he's, I was surprised when I talked to a student, they don't know who he is, but he's at Princeton University, has the most prestigious professorship there, and is America's leading public intellectual. Then I have John Keown, who is the world's leading expert on euthanasia-assisted suicide. He's at Georgetown University. I have Helen Alvarez, who is a professor at George Mason Law School, who used to be the pro-life spokesman for the U.S. Bishops Conference, and who is a very prominent law professor. She and I and other people have filed briefs in this case called the Dobbs case, which has to do with abortion in the United States. And she's filed a brief on behalf of herself and 120 women professionals, making it clear that abortion has not helped women. But anyway, she's a great member of it. Then I have Tom Farr, who is the president of Religious Freedom Institute, which is one of the 2 or 3 leading religious freedom advocacy organizations in the country. I also have Father Kevin Flannery, who is a world-renowned philosopher at the Gregorian University in Rome, and who Brandon and others got the opportunity. He came and spoke to our class, and he's written recently on human rights from a deeply philosophical point of view. And then I have John DiIulio, who's a renowned American sociologist and historian at the University of Pennsylvania.
You do have a great board. There's no question about it.
And you know, Brandon, I just want to add for people listening, and you can attest to this, you know, one of the things I make a big effort to do is to get, this isn't just an advisory board that's on a piece of paper. This is an advisory board that you interact with. So I think at least 5 of the advisory board members this year, my students will have interacted with, and of the 7, 5 of the 7. And it'll be that way next year as well. And I think Brandon can tell you, I mean, how did you find that?
No, it's absolutely true. The advisory board is very hands-on, as they say. They're very engaged and active and a part of shaping us in a really great way. They're not, this is not some distant out there, you know, aloof board. They're very, very much integrated into. And
they're very interested in the students. I mean,
very much so.
Yeah, I mean, they very much care. They care about these issues, and they care about the students. And I really don't think any other program anywhere can match that level of interaction with such leaders in human rights. So that's them.
Well, the next question then, we want to hear a little bit about more of your story, Professor Saunders. And, you know, for those of you watching, he is a great mentor for anyone who's interested in doing human rights work. You've got a great leader here. And so what got you passionate about human rights? And those who are interested in, you know, working in the field, what would you say to them? You know, could you share some stories about some of the work that you've done, and why is it rewarding? Just share from your heart a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, the reason I got involved was I was influenced by John Paul II, but I was really interested in religious liberty because I took religion seriously. And through that, I met the bishop from the Sudan and set up that NGO to help him. And from then on, I was very much involved in it. And also, I just think, you know, you just have to encounter some denial of human rights, and that's when it'll speak to your heart, a particular situation, a particular denial. So in my case, it was, you know, the Sudan was what got me involved. And then I was also in my own life, I was also involved very much in the bioethics debates of a decade ago, where it was very much a question of whether we would be producing human beings to use for experimental purposes, or whether already existing human beings could be used for experimental purposes through cloning and stem cell research. And the thing that always struck me about that was kind of how absurd the conversation was, because the only difference, you know, between an embryo and you or me, Brandon, is that we are adults and we walk around on our own. But an embryo is just a teeny tiny human being, which is more in need of help and support and solidarity than we are. I mean, we all need it, but the embryo is the most vulnerable. So we used to say, and I still believe this is true, human rights for human beings. The only thing that's necessary for you is to be a member of the human species. If you're a human being, you have human rights, whether you're teeny tiny, little, defenseless, forgotten, ignored, beaten, you know, it doesn't matter. You have that human dignity because Christ died for you. And you got it from the moment you live, which is from fusion of sperm and egg or whatever. It's from first cell until you get to your age, till you get to my age, till you die, or if you die along the way. So from the time you come alive to the time you die, you're a living human being. You're entitled to human rights. And I just saw so many instances where that was being denied. And it is always the powerful people who deny it to the powerless people. It is never the powerful, who deny it to themselves. Never. You should always be suspicious if anybody is taking human rights away from any member of the human species, because it's always in the service of the powerful to enrich themselves, either in material goods or in power or in pleasure or in comfort. And that's why you have to fight for each one. I mean, you think about trafficking. I know a lot of people care about trafficking. Those people who are trafficked and the world's definitions don't matter because they're, quote, nobodies from nowhere. And but that's the exact opposite of the case, right? They are the most eminent beings there in the world, in the universe, because they're created in the image of likeness of God, because they have an immortal soul, because Jesus Christ died for them. So the call to respect and promote and protect human rights is a response from the heart. Our program is a response from the heart. It's not just an intellectual exercise. In fact, it's partially an intellectual exercise, but it's essentially a call to be of service by responding to people in need.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll just to add on to that, I would say that the dominant theme, and this has been my experience, is just that it's so grounded, the course curriculum and all of the classes, is that there's actually, it means something so profound to be a human person. That's not just an afterthought. It informs absolutely everything. You have to understand what it means to be human if you're going to in any way meaningfully contend for human rights. And so the next question, and you were speaking of the embryo there, you've just written a new book, and it's titled Unborn Human Life and Fundamental Rights, Leading Constitutional Cases Under Scrutiny. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I do have a copy of it, but it's the thing that's interesting about it is it looks at this question of unborn human life around the world. So we look at countries in North America, Latin America, and Europe. It's not every country, it's just selected countries. But it looks at how human dignity is being either denied or protected. Although the general story of the book is that these protections are being eroded. And why are they being eroded? They're being eroded because people don't understand everything we've just been talking about. You cannot, remember what I said about the powerful and the powerless. You cannot push out of the what I call the circle of protection by the law. You cannot push anybody outside of it without destroying what everything means. I mean, it is a fundamental error that has to be addressed, because if I can say an unborn is not entitled to protection, what stops somebody else from saying a Catholic is not entitled to protection, or a man is not entitled to protection, or somebody under the age of 10 is not entitled to protection, or a worker who doesn't have a green card is not entitled to protection, or, a woman who doesn't have a husband is not entitled. And these are not theoretical. This isn't classroom, folks. This is the fact. All of those issues have been fought over. The whole history of Western civilization is expanding the circle of protection to bring in more and more people within the protection of the law and the rule of law and the equal application of the law. So when we look at what's going on around the world and we see the erosion of the legal protection for unborn human life, it points to a big problem in the world. We're forgetting the fundamental truth of the dignity of every human person. So it also has concluding reflections by John Finnis. And if we have anybody listening from around the world, they'll know who John Finnis is. He, in my opinion, he's the leading legal philosopher in the world. So that's the book, but it tries to respond to this error of pretending you can cabin the denial of basic human rights to any group of people.
Very good. So the next question that we have is just more about the specifics of the academic program. Could you talk a little bit about the curriculum and the length of this MA degree program?
Yeah, I will. I want to, just before I do that, I want to mention another person who's very involved in the program. And then actually this leads into the curriculum. But his name's Chen Guangchen. He's called the Barefoot Lawyer. Yeah. He's blind and he escaped from China, but he's a world-renowned advocate for democracy and human rights. And he's in the Center for Human Rights with me at Catholic University. And Brandon can tell you he's met with us. And in fact, later this semester, we're going to have a class with him. So he's one of the professors in the human rights program, but the program itself is an interdisciplinary program. So, the key thing is it's not one perspective. It's law, canon law, philosophy, theology, and political theory. And we bring them all together. So we have professors, and Catholic University is blessed to have some of the leading folks in the various fields I just mentioned as teachers, and along with people like Guang Chen or Marianne Glendon or Robert George or Tom Farr or Helen Alvarez. And this week, in fact, we're going to hear from a colleague I've known for 20 years. He's from Bolivia. His name is Yuri Mantilla, and he's an expert in the area of indigenous rights. So that's the kind of general frame of the curriculum. It can be completed in 1 year. You have to take a total of 10 courses. And we have a pretty set curriculum. So there's not a lot of flexibility. There is a little bit. So you take courses in those areas with the idea that you come in as what we call a cohort, which is a small group that gets to know each other, gets to be known by the professors as this is the human rights group. You help one another. You enrich the experience. Brandon, you're a member one this year. What's it like?
It's wonderful. And I think we have a particularly great cohort this year. We've got a lot of awesome camaraderie. We all bounce ideas off each other. We're struggling with one of the classes. We all sort of help each other out, but it's really great. We've gotten together for dinners before, and we've connected as a group. We're all generally pretty like-minded, and we're passionate about a lot of the same things. It's terrific.
And so that's the general model. But you can also go part-time. We have one student right now who's going part-time, but it's really kind of up to you. Some people are working full-time and they can't go to school full-time. They can't give up their job or whatever. But for those who can, it can be done in 1 year. You have a lot of work to do. It's an intensive program. Most graduate programs, you have something like 3 courses a semester. We have 5. So
it's intense. It's intense.
It's intense. I think, as you would agree, Brandon, part of the positive aspect of that is like you said, you see from a lot of different courses a shared insight into certain things. So one course can actually kind of reinforce or be complementary to the others.
Right. There is, I will be, for everyone who's watching, there will be moments where have been in certain classes and you'll notice the unique overlaps and how they all intersect. But it's all of the courses that I've taken thus far are uniquely their own, and professors are really great. So the next question, we'll just move right along here. You mentioned that it's a 1-year MA program. Are there any additional requirements for graduation?
No, I mean, if you complete the 10 courses, you'll graduate.
Okay. So what would you say, who would benefit from a program like this? And you describe the ideal candidate for the MA in Human Rights at CUA?
Well, it must be you, Brandon.
Well,
so look at Brandon, and that's the ideal candidate right there.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I really urge everyone who's listening or watching to apply, even if you're remote. When I watched this webinar back in the fall of 2020, I had that intrigued feeling that just would not leave me alone. And so, if that's you, I just would urge you to take the plunge and explore it, and just see where it goes.
I just say to add on, so. In a sense, so obviously, I mean, we have women, we have people from America, but from other countries. So it's kind of international, it's men and women. But in a sense, there's no ideal candidate. Mm-hmm. You decide if you're the ideal candidate. Right. Yeah. Do you care about human rights? Do you want to make a difference in the world? Then you're the ideal candidate. And we have some people right out of college in this class now, and we have some people who've been working for a while. We have some people who came from a graduate school after having done something else. We have some people who want to go on to graduate work. We have some people that want to go right into the world and be involved in some programs or things. So the ideal candidate is really doesn't exist in the abstract. That's like saying who's the ideal Christian or Catholic. It's everybody, folks, or anybody. You have to ask yourself if you're called into this.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. You discern whether or not you're called, and if you are, be obedient and fill out that application. So, very briefly, what are the application requirements?
Well, I mean, they're on the website, mahumanrights.com. I'm not going to go through them all, but I mean, basically you have to submit an application. You have to have references. You have to have interviews. And, you may or may not be admitted to the program. Hopefully, if you're on fire about it, that's the Holy Spirit and it'll come through. I know people are interested in scholarships, Brandon, so I'll say a word about it. Scholarships, we have, now there's a whole world of financial assistance outside of Catholic University. So I don't know anything about that, and those listening may know a lot. You can certainly find it out. There's U.S. programs and probably international programs and all kinds of assistance. But within my program, I have a fund of money for scholarships that are given through a complex nexus of need and merit, predominantly merit, but also need. And the tuition is a little over $30,000 which, by the way, is a lot of money, but it's a significantly reduced tuition from other programs because we are considered a professional program that prepare people to go out into the world. And then, so we have a reduced, but it's still over 30, it's low 30s. And I have on average, probably for tuition help of about half of that. So, and then of course there's room and board, which I do not provide for. So in terms of scholarships, I have, for anyone admitted, I would probably have something around a half or so scholarship.
That's great. And so what's the deadline to apply?
Well, you can apply all the way up to the summer. I think it's middle of July for foreign students and 1st of July for American students. But you have to realize that, we're in March right now. So scholarships are being given out right now. And when that scholarship fund is gone, it's gone. So it's a little, you can think about it if you decide, if you decide at the end of or the middle of June that you feel that this is what the Holy Spirit called you to do, by all means apply. And if there's scholarship help, you'll be eligible for it. But generally speaking, the sooner the better.
Well, and I'll just mention here, because we've got one of our co-moderators mentioning here in the chat that the fall deadline for international applicants is indeed July 15. The fall deadline for domestic is August 1st, so officially. But I would just urge everyone, if you're interested, get it in as early as you can. I think I filed mine in February or March early. I mean, it was very great. There's one question in the chat here that I think we should explore, and then we'll be about finished. Could you describe some of the professional job placements that these, Catholic University MA Human Rights graduates, what do they get, what institutions are they placed in, where they secure jobs? And can you also describe, that was just okay. Then another question came in, it was basically the same one. So job placements, where does that happen for MA graduates?
Well, this is the third class of the program. So I've had two classes, and as we all sadly know, we've had COVID complications kind of wrecking things. So it's not 100% clear where, but some jobs may be on the hill. So I've got a whole class now that their jobs are not set, so I can't tell you what they're going to do. But I think that one or two of them are going to go on to further graduate studies. One or two of them may work on Capitol Hill, and one or two of them are going to work for NGOs. And the NGO, that means non-governmental organization, which means any organization that's devoted to some of these issues, which could be humanitarian, it could be human rights, it could be religious freedom specifically, like we mentioned. So those kind of organizations. One of our students last year worked for a religious freedom institution organization. One of our graduates is working for a Middle East peace promoting organization. One of our graduates is going to start soon working in the pro-life field. So those are some of the ideas, some of the possibilities.
Another question here from the viewers. What does the interview portion of the application process with you entail?
I mean, just an interview. I mean, if you're in the United States, in the Washington area, you come in and meet with me in person. And if you don't, we'll do it by phone or by Zoom. But the interview will be for you to tell me why you should be admitted into this program. And for me to learn about you to see if I agree.
Sounds good. The final one that I'm seeing here is from another, viewer, someone who's watching. Is there any opportunity to do part-time and distance learning from the UK?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is not an online program it is only an in-person program. That might change in the future, but it's not
for now.
not for now.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing is, even if you're in the UK or some other country, you will get these emails that we send out, our bi-weekly human rights emails, which will often have links to various public events we've done, like the event I did last Friday with Professor Helen Alvarez, or a lecture we had by Professor Robert George or something like that. So those kind of things are available.
Sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and take the liberty of asking the question that, just to sort of tie this up. This was the question that I asked when I watched a webinar like this in the fall of 2020. Do you have to be Catholic to do this program?
Yeah, no, you don't have to be. But you have to be wanting to learn that. In other words, we have people in the program who are not Catholics, but we don't have anybody in the program who doesn't want to learn more about that and who doesn't respect it. It's not a secular human rights program.
Right.
We are a Catholic perspective program, but you can be an evangelical, you could be a member of a non-Christian faith, but you have to be sympathetic to it, and you're going to learn it. You're going to have to take a course or two in theology and things like that, because our view is the Catholic perspective is the philosophy and theology, the law and canon law, the political theory and the social encyclicals of the popes. So it'll give you a perspective you can take into the world. Now, will all employers value that? No. If that's what you want, don't enter this program. Some people will not like that you went to Catholic university. But if you want to work for somebody like that, I don't know why you'd be interested in the program at all.
Right.
We think we have an absolutely unique and important voice that needs to be heard in the public conversations. We don't argue for our voice alone. We do insist on our voice being one of the voices. So I want to train people who can go into any discussion and approach it from a deep understanding of what rights really are. When you get in an argument with somebody, or when, if I had a young woman once who was interested in the program, she worked for a big company, and I remember talking to her about it. And what I would like is, 15 years from now, when she's a senior executive in that company, and they're deciding we're in this country, we're going to start our operations in this country, in Africa or South America or Europe. And we have a big meeting. We're trying to decide what's our human rights footprint. What impact do we want to have as a responsible business on human rights? And when somebody stands up and says, well, we can support the marginalization or the destruction of a certain class of people, she gets up and she says, no, if you do that, you don't support human rights for anybody, because that just means the people in power tell this group. In Sudan, it was these people in the most remote places who didn't have a voice in the government, but they're still human beings. So you have to, and then, if you're in a company and they say, well, we don't, we think we want to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and all this going to church or going to the synagogue or the mosque is foolishness. Our person can explain why religious freedom is as John Paul II said, the first freedom. Yeah. It is a cornerstone or a fundamental stone of any functioning democracy. The American founders knew that too. John Adams said that democracy requires citizens with virtue. Virtue is instilled by the churches. So somebody with a deeper perspective who can help companies to do the right thing, which is to respect true human rights and not start respecting some current intellectual fashion that is actually a denial of human rights.
That's great. The only other question I see here is that any scholarship opportunities for people who apply after the scholarship deadline. I would just say to that, apply before the deadline. I mean,
Yeah, the problem is we passed the deadline. I mean, there's a priority deadline which we passed, which was priority for people. But like I said a few minutes ago, you can apply. I mean, things change. Sometimes a student who's been awarded a scholarship for some reason can't attend or whatever. But if you want to get in on the front edge of scholarship consideration, then wait till next year and apply in the fall for the next year's class. But you can still apply this year, and we'll just see if you get admitted if there's scholarship money.
Okay. Any final words?
From me or from you? Brandon, tell them why they ought to apply.
You ought to apply, and I'll add that I am a non-Catholic. I am an evangelical, but I love the richness of Catholic social thought and what this program brings to the field. And I encourage, if you're watching this and you're not a Catholic, please explore it. It's really, really good stuff, to put it very plainly. I've tremendously enjoyed it. It is tough we do make us sweat, but it's really, really great. And you have professors that are deeply invested in your intellectual and your spiritual formation. They're gracious people who are willing to help if you're struggling. I can't speak. There are not enough good adjectives to use to describe this program. I very much recommend it. And I hope that all of you watching will consider it, if not this year, then maybe next year, and just explore it further. And with that, I will just go ahead and close this out right now. And if you need any more information, go to mahumanrights.com. And as I said at the beginning of this webinar, this will be uploaded to the IHE's YouTube channel, and you will be receiving a recording of this in your email, so you can rewatch it later if you'd like. And again, I would thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to hearing from all of you, hopefully.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you all.